Do you want to be a master farmer and stop having your villagers hate you because they can't eat? Well, I'm going to show you how to master farming so you don't ever have to question it again. The first thing to know are there are 4 different crop types. These are going to be emmer, barley, flax, and rye. Emmer and rye both produce wheat, which gets turned into grain, creates flour, and then eventually turns into bread to feed your village. Barley creates malt and then ale, which will be used to entertain your village, and then flax will be used to create linen, then clothing for your village and your villagers themselves. Now to begin, the most important crop you will need to start off with is wheat. And this is because wheat again creates food for your village, and without food, your village during the winter and cold months will starve very, very quickly. This needs to be one of your initial primary goals. Now before we get growing, you need to understand how the seasons work, so that way we know how to set up our farm plots. The first season is spring. This will be the season you'll get to start plowing and sowing your crops if needed, and where you can actually go into the field itself, select what crop type you want, and your farm hands will begin getting those fields ready and planting the seeds, so that way your crops will begin to start growing. It's important to do this as early in the year at the beginning of March, because the longer time that these fields are sitting here fully set up, the longer time they actually have to achieve maximum crop growth. You can see this field of wheat over here was done very early, and the crop growth is already 55%, whereas this field just got completed, and you can see it's only at 4% crop growth. So the faster you get this done with farm hands, the more crops you're going to get from it. Secondly is summer, and this is the primary season your crops will just continue to grow. Your crops will continue to grow through the summer and up their yield. The third season is autumn, which is when you'll start harvesting your crops and replowing and sowing additional crops after the harvest has been completed. And then winter is where these seasonal resources are completely gone, and any crops left that are unharvested will begin to die. Now that I took you through the seasons, I'm going to show you how to maximize your farming potential. So the first initial thing you'll need to do is build a farmhouse. Now, before you actually place the farmhouse, especially early on in your village, you're going to go ahead and select construction. And on the right hand side, you'll start to want to look at fertility rates. The way fertility rates work in Manor Lords is the ground that's green is much more fertile, and the ground that's red is basically not fertile whatsoever. So by starting, the first initial crop you want to grow is going to be emmer, because you need it to create food and bread for your village. So before placing your farmhouse at the beginning, you're going to want to look and find a green patch of fertility for emmer and put your farmhouse near that, so that way you can grow emmer in a very fertile place, get a lot of flour, and hence a lot of food early. Now again, you're going to want to pay attention to this as you continue to grow flax, barley, and rye as well. But again, rye is a specific type of crop that's highly survivable, so that's why there's much more green everywhere else on the map using rye, which again creates wheat like emmer does, but is locked behind that rye cultivation perk. So now that you've checked out fertility, you'll want to go ahead and place your farmhouse down near one of those green areas if possible to go ahead and start out. Now once you place your farmhouse, you'll want to go ahead and assign one person into the farmhouse, if not 2 if you have them. The more people you have assigned to your farmhouse, the more work gets done and the quicker work gets done. So once you've assigned some people to your farmhouse, you'll then want to go ahead and create a farming plot for whatever you're looking to grow. For instance, we're going to select field here. And when starting, you're going to want to put your first field directly next to your farmhouse. That way your farmers don't have to walk very far in order to get to the actual plot itself. The longer it takes them to get there, the less efficient they are. Just for this example, I'll go ahead and put this field over here. And ideally what you want to start out with is going for around a field size of about 1 Morgan. This is good for 1 or 2 farm hands to maintain, and this will be a good starting farm size that you'll be able to take care of and should give you enough food for the first year or 2. Now once you've placed that farm down, you'll click on it, and this is where you want to select what type of crop type you want to grow. Again, we can grow wheat, barley, or flax, or we can leave this field fallow. What fallow does is actually regenerates all types of fertility, but doesn't give you any actual crops in return. Essentially, we leave this and it doesn't grow anything that year, but all of these actual fertility values go up. Now what this means is, since this wheat is 31% fertility, on this farm plot, if it was 100% fertility, let's say we grow 100 wheat, instead, since it's 31%, we'll be growing 31 wheat instead of 100 wheat. This is why fertility is very important and drastically affects your overall crop growth and how many crops you get from what you actually plant. Starting off, you need to grow something, so that's why you pick one of those green areas to begin, and you go ahead and select to grow some wheat. Ideally in a green area, this will be in the 70 to 100% range. Now, before we go farther growing this wheat, there are actually a couple field tricks that I do want to go ahead and show you. So if you actually select crop rotation, this helps us bring back the lost fertility of this specific field. So if we select the crop rotation, in order to get this back up to around, let's say 100%, ideally we want to go 2 years. So that way this field is fallow for 2 years and increasing the fertility each time. By waiting through 2 years of fallow, this will bring this actual yield up very drastically and give us much more return on basically all of our crops. Now, the next question you're going to ask is, how can we afford to go 2 years without any crop growth? You don't. So in that case, what you're actually going to do is build 2 additional fields like you can see here. And now once you built 2 more fields, what you can then do is, since this one is growing wheat and the other 2 are fallow, you can then go into this field, select crop rotation, make the first year fallow, and then grow wheat here, and then go into the third field and then make the first 2 years fallow and the third year wheat. So each one of these is growing wheat. Between each one, they're constantly recycling, allowing their fertility to again begin to regenerate. Since fields are easy to make, feel free to do as many of these initial fields as you want, so that way you can constantly have fields that are regenerating their fertility and still able to grow specific crops. Now, during the spring, your plowing and sowing progress will continue to go up as your farm hands are able to get to that field to attend to it. As you can see, they've already done these fields that are darker, where you can see the plowing and sowing progress is completed. You want to make sure this is all done on all of your fields by the end of spring, before summer actually starts. And you can do this in prioritize fields by changing the field priority. This one's set as medium, whereas this field right here is set as high, meaning this field will always be done first. You can also go into your farmhouse and select the option that will be right here for creating a plow. This will give you a plow, which will help make some of these tasks go much quicker. In order to have access to that plow feature, which is very useful, you simply need to put 1 point in the heavy plow skill under the development tree. In addition, you can actually click the livestock tab and assign a specific livestock to help you with this farming. Additionally, that will increase the speed that a lot of these tasks can actually be completed in. And you want to prioritize enough farm help or enough people assigned to the farmhouse for this spring season, so that way you can make sure all of your crops get planted and tended to. Now, let's say something comes up and you need to harvest your crops early. You can simply click the forced early harvest button. This will allow you to ignore the harvesting season, and as long as the crop percentage is over 15%, your farm hands will then go and harvest that field early. Make sure if you do this, you do uncheck this option once it's completed. Otherwise, next season, they will do the same exact thing again. Now, once you've finished harvesting your crops in the autumn season, your emmer and your rye will be transported into the farmhouse, which will then be turned into grain. Then once it's turned into grain, you need to make sure to build yourself a windmill and assign someone there. They will begin to turn your grain into flour. And then once they've done that, there's the communal oven, where once you assign someone, they will turn your flour into bread, which will then be stored in your storehouse and be delegated throughout the marketplace, so that way your village will have as much food as it needs. Now, one important thing to note here is, if you have a burgage plot level 2 or above, if you actually click into it and select that it turns into a bakery extension, this will increase the amount of bread that you get from flour by twice the efficiency, giving you a lot more food overall. Now, in order to unlock the bakery as an artisan selection, you actually have to select that here within the development tree itself. So keep that in mind, and it's easier to create a lot more food this way. Additionally, once you've harvested flax, that flax will then be used at your weaver workshop to be turned into linen. Now, linen will be used by the tailor shop once you specify it, just as you did the bakery extension, to turn that into gambesons, which are clothes that will be used by some of your troops, as well as clothes which will be used by your village to make them happy. And finally, barley. That barley will be used at your malt house to create malt, and that malt will then be turned in at the brewery to ale, which will go into your tavern, which will then provide entertainment for your village. And again, the brewery can be established just like the tailor shop and the bakery by turning one of these burgage plot level 2s into any one of these options. Now, throughout the summer months, your crops will continue to grow, and this growth percentage will continue to increase all the way up to 100%, which will increase the overall yield that you'll get when you actually harvest. Now, once we begin the autumn season, that's when crops will begin to be harvested. So you want to make sure you assign as many people to your farmhouse as it takes to get these crops harvested and get some of your field plots set up for next year. Again, during the winter months, nothing will really happen. And then once you get into the spring, this process will start all over again. Again, 2 important skills you can take early are the rye cultivation perks. So that way you can plant rye. It'll make getting wheat so much easier. Now, one other trick you can use is click on a field and you can actually fence up that field and allow it to be turned into a pasture. So that way it can rapidly restore its lost fertility. This makes it so you only require 1 year of fallow to gain a bunch of fertility rating for each individual crop, speeding up your fertility by quite a lot. This will again actually have to be unlocked via the development menu, and you can unlock that using fertilization here. By doing that, you can then purchase goats and livestock to put on this specific field, and by doing their business, they will fertilize it for you, again upping the amount of fertility that all of your crops get just by 1 year of fallow versus 2 years. And that's everything you need to know about farming. Just remember, make sure you know your seasons and make sure you keep your fields as high fertility as possible. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and hope you guys have a good one. Peace.